Hey, we're on. Hi, everybody. It's me, Leslie, and Zazoo Plazz. We're here teaming up this week, August 17th, 2025, last week of season for the weekly Zazoo Plazz report. So welcome, new and returning viewers. You're in for a good one. Yeah, I just never know where it's gonna go. I take notes. See, I got all these notes. I look at the readings, the scripture readings for the week. And I run them through the Zazoo Plazz filter, and they come out, strained, and I give you the dregs, or I give you what's left after I strain out the stuff that we don't need, and I serve it up with a couple ice cubes and a slice of lemon, and that's your refreshing drink. I don't know where that came from. I guess it's all the imagery with the water. So there's some water. Let's get the astrological forecast. So the sun's going into Virgo on the 22nd, so this week, and then the new moon is on the 23rd in Virgo. So we're going in. It's going to be back to school season. So this is kind of like, let's see, in my chart, I'm going from the 11th into the 12th. My 12th house. I have 12th Virgo in my 12th house, which is deep. That's like, it's like in the readings today, this guy, the prophet Jeremiah, gets thrown into a cistern, which, it's an image for, cistern is like I'm thinking like Silence of the Lambs, when it gets thrown into the pit and it puts the lotion on. Never mind. It's not a well. It's more like it's something used to hold water, but it's cracked so that the water doesn't stay. So it's like things that are the imagery is things that are used in place of being close to spirit, to source, and there's no substitute. You can try, but the water just flows right through, it's just a pit of mud. So, in the church, I looked it up. My kid, the younger one, he was an altar server, and so he got to, for years, until he was a teenager at our parish church, because we Catholic, French, former spouse, Polish, so our kids are French and Polish, and so we did all the sacraments with them, and we got all the sacraments, and I saw at CCD, so I should know this stuff. A cistern, but I didn't always know all that. There were a lot of technical terms for things. So our kid got to know. He wore the robes. He served on Christmas. He served on Easter. Now I think about it, the older one didn't, but the younger one, and his middle name was Francis, which, my husband's uncle was a priest, and his name was Francis. Not his priest name. His priest name was Harold, but, so, he was named for St. Francis, so, and that was the other parish church in our town. And St. Francis is close to animals and nature, so it's kind of funny that kid went into environmental science. He's got his chickens and his cat and his donkeys. But what was I saying? No, the thing is that a cistern, I guess it's a place where they dispose of the holy water and the leftover things, liquids from mass that don't go into the sewer system. Now, it's not clear whether all churches have this. Modern churches might have, replaced that system with something newer and more, I don't know, more modern. But the way they used to do it was, the water would go directly like through a pipe outside into the ground, which if you know anything about, sacred rituals and ceremonies, like on the full moon, like you can, you can do different rituals with fire and stuff. And it's, when you like make intentions or write notes, you can burn them and then put the ashes in like a plant that can fuel, to help the plant grow, or, certain things have to be buried outside. It's complicated, but the more I learn about it, the more I think, even the incense, a lot of the traditions that they used in the church were traditions that were used in, societies. It's just something, spiritual things that people did, in ancient societies. But people think that only priests could do it, because that was the establishment of the Catholic Church, right? Of all churches and religions. So it's interesting. The more I learn about, religion and about spirituality, and there really is, there are things that, anyway. What I take it with a grain of salt. These are just my thoughts. What do I know? But it's interesting when you learn. Anybody can learn these things. Jesus, and part of the lesson of today was Jesus was trying to tell us when he says, my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. Okay, he didn't want followers like on social media. He didn't need followers. He didn't want people hanging on him, okay? This is not what Jesus wanted. That's what I'm saying. What he meant by follow was he wanted us to be like him, to use him as an example, those of us who came after, right? So that's the thing to keep in mind. Yeah, and that's one of the greatest misunderstandings, I think, of reading the Bible, right? And then what happened after was not necessarily, and it wasn't what Jesus wanted, okay? So it's all related here. But I'm going to tell some funny little stories before I dive into the scriptures more. We just had a big storm, a rainstorm. And of course, they always told us growing up, don't shower when there's a thunder, lightning storm and stuff. And of course I get in the shower and it starts thundering and I'm like, ah! They scared us about it. But I think there is something to it, the conductivity of the water, and it's not a good idea. So we had a storm, but it's the weirdest thing. So I looked at all the windows, and no water was leaking of any of my windows. And, because I keep them closed because I've got the air conditioning on. But last week we had a really bad storm, and the water, it may have been coming in more at an angle, but, I've never had this really be a problem. I'm in my office, and I have one of those slider windows with the screen, and I made sure all the windows were locked tight. The water is coming in through the window, and it's accumulating. It's flooding the little windowsill, and it's pouring onto the floor. I grabbed my photos and pulled them away. I have a little table with my photos while I'm scanning them. I pulled everything aside, wiped down the table. Nothing got wet. And I ran and got all my spare towels out of the linen closet, and I put them all on the floor, and on the windowsill, and I ran out of towels. And I'm like, the damn water is still coming. It's coming in. And then after, I thought of my former ex-husband's cousin. She every time she's actually his cousin, but her kids are just a little younger than him. So her his actual cousin is 10 years younger than his dad. So, he grew up with his, like, I don't know, is it cousins once removed or second cousins when they're your cousin's kids? His cousin's kids are Gen Xers and just a little bit younger. And so she would come down with her husband and sometimes, the family. And she'd come down from New York, just Westchester County. And every time, and I would started calling her Calamity Jane. That's not her name. Because every time she would show up, very, very nice lady, Aries, but, very, very much a strong woman, a very strong woman. And she had 3 sons, and, and then her husband. They'd all come, and every damn time she showed up, there'd be a flood. And I started to say to him, I said, I think she brings it with her. Because we've never had, one time, we had a house full of people, and we had the cooler, which has never leaked before, one of those old-fashioned coolers that he got from his, that they made in like the 60s that, it's like gold and yellow, yucky, but they lasted forever. So we put ice and sodas in there, so people could just help themselves. The damn cooler starts leaking in the kitchen, just out of nowhere. It starts like from the bottom or something. It's never leaked since or before. So she grabs the mop. She goes in the closet. She grabs the mop. She starts, mopping it up. And then all her kids join it. They all get it. And then another time, our window in the living room, we had these big tall windows. It was raining, and the window was closed. And I had a book on the windowsill that some friend of mine had given me, and it was ruined. I had to throw it out. Anyway, I didn't really want to read it anyway. And she wrote story in a future book. Anyway, yeah. So the damn window starts leaking, right? And she's up there with the I don't know, the towel. I don't know. She was shoving things. She would go into my closet, my pantry, and start getting stuff, going in the cupboards. One other time, it was the day my mother died, and she was all around. And no, not my mother. This lady. She was at our house for our youngest son's high school graduation party. The same day my mom died. Later in the day, and I swear somebody had left a wine glass, and it could have been her. I'm not saying it was her. It could have been one of her group, or somebody else. Somebody was drinking wine. I didn't drink, mind you. Somebody else, and they put the wine glass right by the dish drainer, which was to the left of the sink, and which is right in my elbow space. And I'm rushing, I'm trying to do everything, and I hit it with my elbow, and it went on the ground and smashed in a million pieces. Wine is everywhere. Guess who was right on it? We had 5 people cleaning up the glass. I just barely looked down, and there they all are. It's like they needed, some people, they come into your life, they bring the emergency so that they can, they bring the crisis so that they have something to do. I'm just going to leave that right there. Yes, I talked about that. Let's see. Oh, my neighbor's on vacation. There's been a parade of people coming in and out to take care of the doggy. So that's nice. I have a nice, quiet, peaceful time. I might make a quiche this week, but this time I got one of those pans. I think I might pre-cook the quiche dough in the pan first and let the air do it and then put the liquid in? Because last time it leaked all over the oven. That's not good. Okay, is that not okay, Zazoo? Start with the reading. Get on it. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So you can look at what's going on today. I'm not going to go into detail, but the events of the world, and you can read the Bible, these readings, with an eye or an ear toward, the sort of the modern, the current environment, right? The feel of it, and reading scriptures with that, an awareness, not a judgment, not letting it get to you, but an awareness of what's going on in the world, and you can find parallels and ways to deal with it. So these princes, Jeremiah, these princes, they were threatened by Jeremiah. Was going around and he was speaking the truth, speaking, giving people hope in God's message, right? The Old Testament. And there were these princes, around the king, and they're feeling threatened by this truth, People, does that sound familiar? That, people feeling fearful for their position. They're fearful that, people are out there saying things and getting the people all stirred up, right? They don't want that, do they? No. So they said to the king, let's get this guy, throw him in the cistern. He's getting the people all worked up, We shouldn't be saying such things. We shouldn't let him, right? So Mercury's in Leo. So that's kind of like, Mercury and Leo. There's pride there. There's a leader, the leadership, right? And then there's the a side where how is that affecting people? When somebody stands up and takes charge, starts saying things and people are listening, right? That's threatening to people who they have to amass a big army, and go against someone. They have to create. In other words, does this sound familiar? Just like the cousin. Some people need to create a crisis so they can swoop in and pretend to come to the rescue against a situation that is not dire. In other words, they're making up this scene. They're saying that the people are getting upset. The people aren't upset. The people are peaceful, right? But in order, they can't have that because, that's dangerous. If people are happy and people are peaceful, what else is going to happen, They might lose their precious positions. They might be overthrown. People might actually realize that there's something that's not quite right. So anyway, they threw Lord Jeremiah into the water, into the cistern. There's no water, no food in there. And some guy, court official, Ebed Melech, he came to the king and he asked to release him so that he wouldn't starve. Which I'm starving right now. I need my paleo hot chocolate snack, my rice cake, the cashew butter. So he took 3 men with him to go get Jeremiah out. Yeah. So, and then it says, Psalm 40, Lord, come to my aid. That makes sense. He drew me out of the pit of destruction and made firm my steps. He put a new song into my mouth. Love that. A new song. Oh, that agrees with the song for today. A new song. That's good. Many shall look on in awe and trust in the Lord. Right. So that's what Jeremiah was doing by his example. Right? The people, the princess throwing him in the cistern just made people believe in him more. because then he got rescued, right? So he was in a very dire situation. So sometimes God puts us in dire situations. And we think, how am I ever going to get out of this one? But you say, well, God has been good to me before. It was a way of showing the people that what Jeremiah was preaching, he also, he embodied, right? Which is why Jesus, exactly what Jesus was saying about himself, to follow him. In other words, he knew he had to go through some awful suffering, right? But he did it so that, because he knew that there was joy for him. He knew that this was, the worst of it. And once he was past the right hand of the Father, he knew that people would, certain people would be, would have faith because of that, would see everything, would look at his life and and put two and two together and, ask to be transformed in the way, that he envisioned for us. So it's kind of, it's, all I see, it's all kind of connected here. Many shall look, I don't know. So, this is interesting, okay? Hebrews, it's Paul, I think it's Paul writing to the Hebrews. He's asking the people to get rid of their burdens and sins clinging to them, right? He says, as there's a cloud, that's a hint, cloud of witnesses, all right? So he said, people are watching. So you've got to be completely open and, honest about things that you've done, so no one has anything to hold, to hold against you, right? To be completely pure and deal with our shadows and our karma, so that it doesn't come back to bite us, right? Because if you're out there and you're a leader, right? And Virgo. So Virgo is a sign about, very detailed. It wants everything perfect, spotless, right? So that's what they're saying, to be perfect and spotless in terms of getting rid of, anything that's holding you back. There's a saying about the eagle with the crow on its back, right? The eagle is calm. He just keeps going higher and higher. That crow is pecking at him. He's annoying, but if you raise your energy, the eagle just flies higher and higher, and then the crow can't breathe, so he falls off, Certain things, you can't, it's best to just keep your energy, raise your energy. And then those things that used to bother you, they'll just fall off. And you'll be like, why was I so, worried about this? That was, you can't use your mind to think of ways to get over your problems. Sometimes you have to, you have to slow down, take a break, and, and I do this. You have to let things come through you naturally, whether it's creativity, you need that time to be still so that the creativity the spirit can flow through you and naturally, right? And I think something that I talk about a lot, that I think is a big problem in our world today, is the idea of rushing, say you're a creative type, an artist, singer, writer, whatever. The worst thing is when, you put out something and it's successful, and people are like, when are you going to come out with a new one, a new song, a new book? That drives me nuts. I saw some people, after I wrote my first book, I saw some, I was telling some friends about it, my high school reunion. They're like, hey, Leslie, when are you going to write another book? Like, oh, God, it just, I don't hold it against people. A lot of people have said that to me. Wow, why haven't you written a new book? they think that they act like I'm this lazy person, right? And I have to then defend myself. And I'm not going to do it anymore. Because the way I work, I've been living my life. I've had to, provide a secure foundation for myself before I begin to build things up. And in the meantime, I've been doing 5 years of videos on here and my Facebook page, and I created a website, and I've been doing marketing, and trying to get, a name for myself. And when the time is right, I will write more books. But you can't rush it, So that's part of the song today too. It says there's a cloud of witnesses. So, every artist, I'm sure, has faced this. The record company pressuring them to write a new song, and then, but if you rush, then it's going to be fake. Something's going to be wrong, and then you're going to have to go back and change it, right? So, if I'm not feeling it, it's not going to happen. It's when it bubbles up and it feels like fun, and it lights me up, then it'll be the right time, right? When I'm burning with this desire to create something, to say something, that's when you go with it, right? It's like I go shopping. How many times have I gone shopping and bought crap when I wasn't in the mood and I have to go return it? That's it. Anyway. My sheep. Oh, so Luke 12. It says, Jesus, he came to set the earth on fire, and how he wished it were already blazing. In other words, he knew that it was going to take a while for his message to spread, and a long time. And so, in God's time, though, God's time is not our time, right? He knew that it was going to take ages for enough people to become aware of what he was talking about, to really make a difference, for the earth to evolve, for people to evolve, humanity, right? But at the time, he knew that it was a sacrifice that he was going to have to make. So, and then this is interesting. He said he didn't come to establish peace on earth, but rather division. And that's good. That's good. All right? So, and that's one of the biggest, misunderstandings. He was a Pisces. They say Jesus was a Pisces. But, if you ever see the symbol for Pisces, it's two fish going in different directions, right? So, in other words, peace is not, in other words, the fire, the Holy Spirit, right? Fire is one of the symbols. God, life is constantly moving, constantly evolving. Look at the elements, right? Nothing stays still, right? But, it's interesting. So, in other words, becoming, more spiritually enlightened means to have an awareness that, though we're all one, right? Whether it's some goes this way and some goes that way, it's both, it's all part of the same whole, right? Virgo's opposite Pisces. Virgo is wholeness, right? So that's, I think, part of what is going on there. I could be wrong, I don't know. But I think that's the spirit of what he was saying. In other words, peace with nothing happening is not, it's boring. There's no creation going on there. Creation is messy. Transformation is messy. God's creation is messy, right? If you think it's going to be all nice, neat, and tidy, and tied with a bow, no. Okay, so, Song of the Week. Okay, so for those of us Gen Xers who were born in 1965, as I was, this is a song this is our song. This song is as old as me. Actually, came out, no, it's older than me. Came out, it was recorded, okay. It's the Rolling Stones, Get Off of My Cloud. It's perfect. So, I'll post a couple of them. One of them was the black and white, them singing it. I'll try to find one that's more modern. But when I was in high school, we had this as our pep rally song, like for football one year. And I remember it. I think we had like a big poster, and I had a cloud, and we were all singing the song, and it was really cool. This song was written, the lyrics by Mick Jagger and the melody by Keith Richards. To follow their song, I can't get no satisfaction. Yeah. To follow up on that one, it was recorded September 65, released September 24th, 65 in the U.S., October 22nd in the UK. And it went to number one November 6, 1965. When I was 4 days old, it hit the number one on the Billboard. So, this was the number one song when I was born, like one of them. It was on its way up. Get off of my cloud. I've been saying that to people my whole life. Get out of here. Leave me alone. I should have brought out my hat, my do not disturb hat. Anyway, it's on the door. So they had this hit record, right? And they thought they could sit back for a while and reflect on everything that had happened, right? Since their big hit. And then, gradually start working on something new. People kept bugging them. When are you going to write another song? They said people's expectations of them prompted them to write this song. That people were bugging them, and they're like, get away from me, And Keith Richards never liked it. He said they didn't get any peace, in other words. He never liked it. He said it was rushed, and he wanted to do it slower. And then, but the pace of it was too fast. And then somebody else ended up doing it slower, which was better. But nevertheless, it was a huge hit. And Billboard said it was a wild, far-out beat number. Thick and funky rock, rollicking, fast-moving, danceable. Far out, man. Anyway, I was a baby. I was a fetus, his son. No, actually, yeah. I was a 9 month old, 8 months old. Not quite 9. So Mick Jagger said that the world in the early 60s was an ordered, restrictive society. And this song was a reaction, a post-teenage alienation, stop bugging me kind of song, right? And that's interesting because that was the boomers, It's like they wanted their parents to stop bugging them, right? And that was not the case, with our generation. But we were born, us, the earliest Gen Xers, we were born into the sentiment at the time. So I think what we did was, we couldn't react to it because we were infants, right? But I think that maybe the spirit of the times was embodied in our, in our astrological chart, in our DNA, right? To kind of, and those who would say that we had a chip on our shoulder, well, and this was the mood of my mother. Get out of me! Get out! I'm sick of this kid. Get off! Get out! Get out of here! Give me my body back, my peace. Psst, get out of here. So I'll leave that right there, and go have my snack. Pass pass out like Jeremiah and his cistern if I don't have something to eat. I have leftover Mexican casserole. I made some beef stir fry with broccoli, but you can't eat that 2 days in a row. I just get so sick of it. Meat gets a little tough. Anyway, okay, Zazoo, enough of a rant. Okay. So, the books will come. They'll come. I'm getting there. I mean, I bug myself, The whole world around says, you gotta be doing, move, that. No. Do me a favor this week. Take a little time. Time out, Take some time for you to reflect and sit and, be peaceful and let the creativity flow through. And I'll be back next week, same place, different time. All right, take care. Bye-bye.